right. So, oops, and let me get everything set here. All right, so I'll be talking in just a few minutes. I'll just give a brief overview of this theme that we have. We're going to be talking mainly about the 2023 Collaborative Summer Library Program theme, which is all together now. And this is a very broad theme, so we'll give a kind of a high-level overview, and then we're going to switch to Kate next, talking about social and emotional learning. And the All Together Now theme is just perfect for incorporating a lot of social and emotional learning into all of your programs. So just again, this is a really quick overview of, sorry, we're going to start here. The Collaborative Summer Library Program, we do abbreviate this as CSLP, so I'll be talking about that. And just a quick introduction to that, if you're not familiar with CSLP. It was started in 1987 when 10 libraries in Minnesota got together and said, why do we keep recreating our own programs every year on our own? We could collaborate and do this much better and much more sustainably and come out with a better program more cheaply, quickly, and probably better. So they did that and it worked great. And more local libraries started joining on. And eventually it got so large that it was statewide, whole states joined on. And so now it's almost nationwide. There are a few states not participating, but also most of the US territories do participate in this as well. It's very much a grassroots organization. When it's fully staffed, it only has two staff people, two full-time staff, and the rest of it is created by people like us. Anyone from around the country can get involved in different ways. There are committee and board opportunities available for you if you do want to get more involved in that. There's also an opportunity every year to submit ideas for an upcoming program. And there's also an e-newsletter that you can subscribe to. So those are all options for you. And I should have mentioned too at the beginning, we will have some handouts available for you too. And the CSLP links will be in there to these opportunities for you. And I should have mentioned this earlier, if Christy or Kate can prompt me, I'm not able to see the chat right now. If you could prompt me with any questions that come up along the way. Also, I'll just be talking for a very few minutes here, so I can also take questions at the end of my short introductory section here. If you are one to think ahead, here are the themes and slogans coming up. It's interesting. We have Adventure Begin at your library next year, 2024, and then Color Our World, which is a more general theme of art. And then 2026 is dinosaurs, much more specific than the others. So that will be interesting, and so much going on with dinosaurs in Colorado. So I think that will be a fun one. The artist this year is Frank Morrison. Here's just a small snapshot of the artwork that's available for you to use in your programs for this year. And we will be using more of Morrison's artwork throughout the presentations today and next week as well. So just take a look at it. I think it's really eye-catching, and we do have the Frank Morrison doing the artwork for all of the 4 age groups that CSLP provides content for. So young children, kids, teens, and adults. He does it all for this program. So the 2023 CSLP manual is out. I've sent the link, or I've sent the code and the instructions earlier, but I will send that. I'm going to send that out again. We also have the manual on flash drive and a few copies of it on paper. If you are interested in either of those, please do let me know. You can either put it in the chat here today or just send me an email, and I will put those on the courier for you. But those are available to you for free. The CSLP manual does have a few new features this year. So there are activities by material type, which is a little different. Sections for, there's a section for standalone printables. So if there's something that is a printable activity, there's a whole section for that. And then the programs are broken down in a little different ways this year. So they're broken down by programs that are low cost, solo librarian friendly, which I like, passive programs, decoration and display ideas, outdoor programs, outreach, STEM, activities with Spanish or bilingual printables, games and activities, and also arts and crafts. So each year, CSLP tries to improve the manual based on feedback that they get from users across the country and incorporate that into the new manuals. So the CSLP folks are hoping that these new breakdowns will just help you search for programs and activities that are most relevant and easy for you to do when you're looking to use them. And just a few ways to think about how you might keep this simple for you, the summer programs. Maybe you can simplify registration. Maybe you can make that easier in some way, or not have any registration at all to make it really simple. Same actually with tracking. So perhaps now you track by pages read or books read or time read, or by maybe you have a bingo kind of game. Think about ways that you might be able to simplify that, break that down a little bit. Make it easier for both you and your patrons. Maybe you can simplify incentives. If you give 3 levels of incentives, maybe go to 2 or 1. A more radical idea, but it's worked in some libraries, is just to get rid of incentives altogether, or perhaps have a group incentive. For instance, a pool party at the end of the season instead of individual prizes. You might be able to simplify levels of completion. Again, maybe instead of having 3 levels to complete the program, like you have to read so many books to complete level 1, so many more for level 2, and so many more for level 3. Maybe there's a way you can knock that down to 2 or even 1 level. And then programming, lots of ways you can simplify your programming. And then, so again, all together now is a huge, broad theme. And one partner that Christy and I have engaged with is the Random Acts of Kindness Foundation. They happen to be based in Denver. It's this wonderful international organization that's right here. And that's been fantastic. They've been wonderful to work with. We're just delighted. I'm not sure where the partnership will go, but they are very happy to work with libraries, to be sure. So some things I pulled from Random Act of Kindness is they have this sort of kindness for broken down in this way. So you can have kindness for others, for your community, for animals, the environment, and yourself. It's great certainly to be kind for yourself. Another way you might think of this theme is how you can build community. That is so important, especially, it's always important, of course, but it's particularly important now, at this stage of the pandemic. People may not have been gathering for a while in your community, and now there's an opportunity again. So definitely a lot of ways to build and reunite the community. There are an awful lot of wellness and mindfulness ideas that can come with this, and also self-care. All of these can be worked in really nicely with your summer program. And that is my section for now. So I'm going to stop sharing and look at the chat, see if anyone has any questions. Oh, good. Diana says she likes the new format. Yeah, again, every year I think they tweak it and it gets a little better. So, oh, good. Yay for dinosaur. We have a good dinosaur one. Great. I'm just going back through all the chat. Does anyone else have a thought on how you might interpret this all together now theme? It is broad, and it can be like, I don't even know where to start. That's not concrete enough. And yes, the slides will be available. They're not up quite yet, but we will have those to you. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, any other ways to think about this theme? Maybe you thought about it already done some planning, looked at the manual, or maybe just something that came to mind. Oh, nice, James, thank you. Obstacle courses and team building exercises, I like that. And that's great, a nice physical activity as well. That's wonderful. Andrea, well, that's great too. You don't have to stick with a theme for every event that you do. So I love it. Dinosaurs are always popular, right? Forever. And now you can just be prepared for 2 years from now, like you said. That's great. Lee, teamwork and collaboration, sports. Yes, definitely. I like we're all thinking of physical activity, which is wonderful. Introducing community members. Diana wants to do a touch a truck event. Yep. And talk about the community folks and how they contribute to the community well-being. Great. Yeah, we're going to touch on that actually. So that's super. Anything else? Oh, here we go. Escape rooms and mystery parties, always popular. Yep. A lot of collaboration. That's great. Collaborative art. Yeah. We're going to have some examples of that next week. So thanks. Yep. Yeah, watch for Melody's session on that next week. She'll be talking a lot about that. She's got some great examples. Intergenerational programming, yes. Oh, right across from a senior center, great. And a collaborative art project, that's wonderful. Really wonderful. Great ideas, everyone. All right, well, keep thinking about that. If you have any further ideas, please just type them in the chat whenever they should pop into your head. And with that, I think we'll launch into Kate's presentation on social and emotional learning, which again, just ties so really well into this. And then after that, we'll have a brief 5-minute break before we transition into adult services. So over to you, Kate.
Thanks, Beth. And yeah, if you can keep an eye on the chat for me, that would be great. If there's some things that pop up there, because I've got some questions for everybody who's here today, actually. So okay, let me get the old screen share set up as well. There we go. Okay. So today we're going to talk a little bit about social emotional learning, and we're actually going to talk about it in like with a broad lens as far as ages and stages of development are concerned. So, so hopefully this will be relevant. I do a lot of early childhood stuff, so a lot of times when I'm talking, it's about early childhood. But today we're gonna broaden that a little bit, or a lot, I guess. So, so this is kind of what we're going to talk about during this portion of today's workshop together. So we're going to talk a little bit about the what and the why, so that we're all kind of starting from a similar definition in our discussions of what social emotional learning is, and why we should maybe be thinking about it when it comes to library programs and services. And then we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about social emotional learning and kind of what it is and what it isn't, and how to talk about it in your community, and talk about it when it comes to library services. And then we'll talk about how can you actually do this in your library, and including ways that you could potentially do this in your library without it being one more thing on your plate, right? Because I think we're all feeling that these days. So, and then I have just a few resources to highlight that I'll share at the end. And also, if anyone else has really great resources when it comes to social emotional learning, feel free to put those in the chat at any time. But definitely when we get to that part, maybe we can do a little bit of resource sharing as well. So let's start with what and why. So I think this is one of my favorite definitions of social emotional learning because it kind of encapsulates the broad scope that is this topic, just in some easy, like sort of umbrella terms that we can think about without getting too far into the weeds with it. So like when I'm talking about social emotional learning today, what I'm talking about is this definition, this idea of continuous development, continuous learning, and like all sorts of different skills that really fall under these three main categories of self-awareness, self-control, and interpersonal skills. And when I'm talking about this, I really mean it like in the sense that all of us need to be able to use these skills in our daily lives, right? So children use them at school, we use them at work, we use them in our lives outside of school and work, because school and work do not a whole life make, right? So, so they're used all over the place. So I just want you to take a minute and kind of think about that and maybe share in the chat what skills or activities help you develop your own self-awareness, self-control, or interpersonal skills.
So we have some responses coming in the chat. Active listening, which is great. Art making or any kind of creative endeavor. Therapy.
I am a fan, yes. That's definitely one of my tools for that, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, so we're developing those skills too. So we're talking about helping our communities develop those skills, facilitating opportunities to develop these skills, and engage in activities that help us with that in libraries. But we're also doing it like on a regular basis, right? And when I was working at Pine River Library, even some of my patron interactions were opportunities for me to hone these skills, right? So we're doing that, we're doing that all the time. So this is not something just young children do. It's not something that only happens in certain environments. It's something that we're working on like throughout our lives pretty much every day. So I wanted to share this particular framework with you. And it's from the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. And this is their evidence-based framework that takes sort of a systems thinking lens to this idea of social emotional learning. And so lots of Colorado school systems, maybe even yours, are using this framework in their schools to think about how they want to approach social emotional learning in the classroom. So it's something to be aware of. It's an interesting resource to look at and kind of an interesting graphic to look at. They divide this idea of social emotional learning into a few more areas than that previous definition. So you'll see they've got a total of 5 skills here, including responsible decision-making and social awareness. And then this idea that those are developed in the classroom, in schools in general, with families and caregivers, and in our communities at large. So like libraries are in here somewhere, right? Like if you were going to put them in here somewhere, where would you settle public libraries in this? Anybody have any thoughts about that?
Maybe in the community tier.
Yeah, if you're asking me that question back, like that is probably what I would say, right? In communities. And so that's kind of what we're talking about today, is that those aligned learning opportunities, like what we could do in the library is how we could embed social emotional learning into the programs and services and outreach and whatnot, all the things that we do, gives us an opportunity to sort of align with potentially what's going on in schools and classrooms, and what like is being encouraged in developing for folks of all ages in our communities. So one more thing I want to mention that we think about when it comes to communities and families and the folks who are coming into your library is that like as I said, social emotional learning happens every day, right? But as we were listing ideas, they were all different ideas. So like it can look different for different people, right? So social emotional learning isn't necessarily like just one thing, like one activity that everyone should be doing, right? It can look different for different people. And there also might be like different factors as to who people are and where they are coming from that might influence how they engage with this idea of social emotional learning. So that's something to just kind of think about. Like, could you think of any of those? Like what sorts of factors might influence like how different people would approach social emotional skill development?
Okay, we have some coming in the chat. Different cultural practices.
Absolutely. Yes, for sure.
Yep. Differences in cultures.
Mhm. Yeah, so there are a couple of others to think about. Is there? I thought I saw another. I can see the number of responses, but not the actual responses.
I'll keep going. Okay, so
Yeah.
we have several new ones.
Okay, great.
Sometimes age or where you are in your life.
Yes, definitely.
Family backgrounds.
Absolutely.
Oh, and this is a nice one. Different viewpoints on what makes a family.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great one. That's fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. So some other things to think about, like our previous life experience, including trauma. So how we approach social emotional learning can improve like our libraries as trauma-informed spaces and our programs as trauma-informed programs, which is a whole other topic in itself. And then something else to think about as well as neurodivergence. That might also impact how people engage social emotional learning as well. Okay, so why think about this, right? Like, what does it matter? What's the impact of providing folks opportunities to practice these skills and engage this sort of thing? These are 6 major takeaways that I pulled from kind of reviewing some of the literature around social emotional learning. So, for example, there are meta-analyses that show long-term positive impacts in academic performance, like over years, right, longitudinally. And sometimes those impacts are even more pronounced, like and effective and long-lasting than focused academic improvement programs, which I think is really kind of interesting. So, and then when folks have the opportunity to are supported in developing those skills, it really, those folks who can do that, especially in schools where a lot of this research has been conducted, because schools are engaging in these sorts of programs in slightly more structured, contained ways, so it's easier for researchers to engage there. They seem to exhibit less emotional distress, kids who have this opportunity to engage in these sorts of skills. And then there has been some research on workplace environments where that bears out for adults as well. And then there's some really interesting connections between cooperative play and what's called pro-social behavior, which is things like empathy or helping others and building positive relationships with others. We saw some of this in the Reimagining School Readiness training data as well, which is really interesting because it that data demonstrates that you can cooperative play develops pro-social behaviors as early as toddlerhood. So that's pretty impressive. So think about how those collaborative art projects that you were just mentioning may actually develop pro-social behavior in your community, increased empathy and willingness to help others and things like that. So definitely seems to improve stress management. It seems to sort of function as a protective effect. Folks who have strong social emotional skills have a tendency when they're experiencing stress or setbacks to come out of those periods of their life with they've less impact on their well-being. So they've been able to maintain a more stable well-being during that time period. So, and then there's some really interesting stuff from a lot of youth programs, like 4-H, for example, that shows that they've documented that there's increased civic engagement in teens and young adults as they move into adulthood if they've been participating in programs that include social emotional learning in their program. So not necessarily a standalone program, right? But it's embedded in what else they're doing in other sort of community or out of classroom programs. And that seems to lead to increased civic engagement. So, get that 18 to 25-year-old demographic to the polls, right? So like have them participate in something like this. So it seems that like a lot of the research is demonstrating that like social emotional learning, social emotional skill practice and development seems to enhance or complement development across domains. So improving cognitive development, mental health, physical health, relationships. So really like a little bit goes a long way, it seems, when it comes to, opportunities to practice these skills and to learn more about these skills in all sorts of different community environments. So social emotional learning is lifelong and not just for young children. And so talking about it in your community, in your library, in your programs is actually a great way to contribute to normalizing mental health as a topic in your community. And to that end, I just want to mention as well that the Colorado Department of Early Childhood has engaged in working on this with caregivers and professionals who are working with young children. So not only fostering early childhood mental health, but fostering the healthy mental health for the folks who are caring for or working with those age groups. And to that end, they've set up an early childhood mental health support line. And we have in the archives on librarieslearn.org a quick bite session where a couple of the folks who help run that support line presented on how that support line can be a tool for libraries and library staff. And we also have a longer session coming up later this year as well. So if you're interested in that topic, please keep an eye out for that. So social emotional learning is a term that's kind of been out there in the media these days as well. I don't know if anybody's seen some of the stories popping up around that, but it can be in some communities a flashpoint term. So recently this topic came up. Someone asked Susan Steele, who is the CEO of the Buell Foundation, when she was speaking about the importance of this for early childhood, they asked her, like, how can you approach this if this has become, sort of a hot button term in your community? And her advice was to talk about social emotional learning without using jargon for it, without using, sort of research terminology or educational institution terminology, but more to focus on the skills, right? So focus on the things you're actually talking about practicing within your communities or fostering within your library without using like this is social emotional learning, like more formal language around it was her advice. So thinking about like what we've talked about so far about social emotional learning and like what you know about your community, like what sort of language do you think you could use to talk about programs, services, and whatnot that include social emotional learning elements to them? Does anybody have any ideas about how they could approach that, or ways you've already approached it with folks in your community?
I am watching the chat.
Yeah, no worries. It's kind of a longer question.
Yeah, it is. That one takes some
to
processing. Yeah. Okay, so here is one idea, talking about our programming as places for kids to have an opportunity to socialize together after COVID closures.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. Definitely. Yeah, and that's very approachable language, right?
Yeah.
And that's really what we're going for, I think.
So another comment is I use the term executive function that focuses on the child and skips the wider implications.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And executive function definitely falls under this whole social emotional learning is this really broad umbrella. And then executive function is like sort of a subset of that. So
So we have a comment that it's come up in their communities that kids and grown-ups were lonely. So definitely having this social opportunity. Here's another example. We presented an emotional regulation storytime program, but build it as an emotions storytime.
Wonderful. Yeah, totally. Yep, definitely. And I love the idea of linking it to community need, like something that the community's identified as a need, like there's this pervasive loneliness and we want to do something about it. Like then linking it to that, I think is a great way to do that.
Mm-hmm. And we have one more comment.
Great.
Maybe zero in on art and exercise activities to attract more individualistic families into it.
Yeah, that's also a wonderful idea. So these are some of the other sort of phrases and ideas that have come up in discussions I've had with people about how to approach this. So thinking about how you can talk about how like certain programs might encourage people to learn about others' experiences, right? Experiences that are different from their own. Opportunities to, like maybe, for example, like maybe a journaling workshop might let you get to know yourself better, so things like that, getting to know others in the community better, like improving, addressing loneliness in the community. Problem solving in different environments is another way you can approach that. Like also thinking about, teen programs, like some of like the escape room type programs. There's actually like a lot of social emotional like skill development that happens in some of those programs. And so, talking about the opportunity to problem solve together, overcome challenges together, then practicing engaged citizenship, like opportunities the library may be, holding space for that in their communities, helping kids make responsible decisions, helping adults make responsible decisions, setting goals, anything that has to do with communication skills as well. So, again, sort of focusing on these skills and activities and just encouraging folks to think how they could use the skills they're learning in the library or use the skills they have the opportunity to practice like out in their lives, at work, at school, like in their families, etc.
And we have one more comment on this
Great.
topic. Using emojis to check in on how kids are feeling during a STEM activity, for instance.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love that idea. I have 3 teenagers, 2 at home and 1 in her first year of college. And I have discovered that if I ask them how they are, I get fine. Like that's all I get, right? How are you? How's school? How's it go? Fine. But if I show them one of those memes with like the 9 pictures, like which sheep are you today? Right? Like they will point out a sheep for me. Like, so that's so much more informative to me as their parent. So yeah, looking for those like other humorous opportunities to use things to communicate around feelings and emotions and how people are doing and how people are connecting. So it's getting creative with it. We're really good at that in library land. So that kind of leads really well into like, how can we utilize some of these social and emotional skill practices and whatnot in our library environments. So I really recommend an integrated approach to this. And the reason I say that is because if you have the time and resources and capacity to create something brand new, like a brand new social emotional learning inspired anchored program, that is awesome and incredible. And maybe you will do that this summer. And a lot of us do not, right? So figuring out other ways to integrate this, weave it into even things we're already doing, right? So when it comes to Storytime programming, we talk a lot about intentionality and how that can increase the impact of what you're doing, right? So we're very intentional with our early literacy tips and whatnot. We can also be very intentional with how we're bringing any of these social skills or emotional vocabulary into our programming as well. And know that by doing that, like that is an impactful thing for you to do, even if it's a small thing and maybe it feels like you're not doing enough, right? I think sometimes we always feel like we're not doing enough, But it is that intentionality, those little moments really do contribute to the development of your social emotional skills, and ours as well, right? So let's all of us learn in that domain. So really just you can think about that. So you can think about just small opportunities to develop self-awareness, to develop self-control, to develop interpersonal skills. And maybe you can add like just a little bit of that to an existing popular program. Like, is there a way you could add a little bit of that? And we're actually, I think Beth is later gonna, in the next session maybe, is gonna talk about like some interesting ways to get like feedback and some assessment tools you can use. And some of those that's kind of built into that. So you build those into your program, and there's really like some nice opportunities to think about those social emotional impacts too as well. So through some of those methods. So think if you need to, think small, think sustainable, think impactful, right? And so can you think of any ideas, or if you are doing this already, what's working for you as far as how you could bring more social emotional learning intentionality to how you facilitate programs at your library?
So we have some chat coming in. Talking about it more with staff who aren't youth focused.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Kind of that whole library approach, right?
Mm-hmm. She adds, it's definitely not common knowledge among all of our library staff. Yeah, so really anyone who comes in contact with children, which are pretty much all frontline staff.
So also kind of think about, are there small shifts to existing popular programs that are coming to mind for you, or that maybe you've already made that seem to be working in your programs for any age group?
Use the guide on the side principle with STEM programs.
Yeah.
So you stand back and let the youth guide one another.
Yeah. Great opportunity for us to practice self-control as we kind of step back, right? But also for them to practice a lot of really great interpersonal skills, problem solving, responsible decision making. Definitely. And for those of you who might be really passionate about this topic and might have resources or capacity to create something like brand new, what might that look like for you? Or have you done something like that already at your library?
Well, while we're switching to that, we have one more comment already about being intentional, which is a great one. I've tried to be really intentional in what books I'm choosing for my middle school age book club and compiling discussion questions that are thought-provoking.
Yeah, that's a great opportunity to like open up discussion around that. I love that. I would love to know what books you feel like have been successful with that.
Emily, if you're willing to share what books you're using, just type in the chat. Or you can share it with us later. And if you're okay, we will share it out to the large group. But that does sound very intriguing. She says sure. So.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I want to read them, and I know some other people who might be interested. So, all right. Well, feel free to continue sharing ideas with each other in the chat. So something to think about with these social emotional learning that can, again, be kind of sort of folded into that intentionality piece as well, is thinking about emotional vocabulary. This is sort of a skill underneath that larger umbrella, but even adults sometimes have very limited emotional vocabulary sometimes. So we're going to do a little experiment, and we'll just take a minute. And what I want you to do is try to, like, either in your head or just on a piece of scrap paper, whatever you've got available. If you're a notes app person, whatever works for you, just take a minute to list every emotion you can think of that you've ever felt and can name. So ready, set, go. It's always fun to see how long a minute feels like on Zoom, right? Okay, you can stop. So just real quick, see if you can tally up how many you wrote down, and then just pop that number in the chat.
20,
Nice.
14, 15.
Great. Well done. So naming emotions and helping to expand emotional vocabulary helps develop self-regulation and control, especially in young children, but really for all ages. For all ages. I think toddlers and tweens could, like, that's Kate's opinion, not research-based, but could probably benefit from from this the most, because those are tough ages with big emotions, right? And so figuring out how to name those and understand what you're feeling can be empowering for kids that age, I think. So this question was sort of inspired by Brene Brown's latest book. If there are any Brene Brown fans here today, her book Atlas of the Heart. In that, she talks about research that they conducted, and that most adults can list 3 emotions that they experience, and typically they are happy, sad, and mad, and those are the 3. So, like, even as we grow into adulthood, expanding our emotional vocabulary can be a very valuable thing for us to invest in or support in our communities. So can you think of ways to integrate emotional vocabulary into daily practice in your library?
I do have one comment in the chat.
Great.
That was a really fun activity, and she'd like to use it in a staff team building, maybe.
Yeah, go for it. Somebody in one of the in-person workshops was talking about maybe using Atlas of the Heart as an adult programming idea, like to use that book to anchor. It's really kind of interesting. It's a beautiful book if you haven't seen the physical copy yet. Some illustrations, and the way it's laid out is very pretty. It's very different than her previous books, but it could lend itself to some interesting discussions and explorations, journaling workshops, book club discussion. Like, people had kind of took that and started to run with it a little bit in some of the in-person workshops. So great tool to kind of launch that emotional vocabulary discussion in a really accessible way, I think. So. And then there's a couple of great videos about this for those of you who work with young children on Storyblocks. So definitely check those out. We're going to go through a few more slides, but I can also give that link to Christy. So when she sends the follow-up email with the slides and everything, you'll have the link to that as well. So there's a really fun emotion song using American Sign Language, and I think an emotion vocabulary sheet or map, like a downloadable there. So there's some resources there to use with younger children if you would like to take advantage of those, for sure. Okay, so I wanted to just have us be able to take a few minutes to think about whatever you've figured out from this, whatever you thought while we're going along, any program ideas that you've thought of for this summer that you might be able to do for different age groups. So for those of you who work with the preschool crowd, like the 0 to 5 crowd, do you have any ideas about how you might use what we've learned today about social emotional learning in your summer programming this coming summer?
Also, what I like about this too is that it shows it's really, you know, often social emotional learning is presented as something that we should be doing for the birth through sixth grade, and then that it sort of stops. But no, it's for all ages, including adults. So this is great activity for that. We have one comment. Ask the younger children to name emotions of the pictures of people in books.
Yeah, that's a great one. Definitely. Yeah, Beth, I was actually recently part of a discussion where someone asserted the theory that is why middle school is such a hot mess, is because we stopped teaching social emotional learning right then. And then we send them to middle school. And they're like, ah. But I thought it was an interesting theory considering the research I was doing to put this presentation together. Okay, how about for that early elementary school age, like the 6 to 10-year-olds? Like if you're doing programming for them, like what might be some creative ways to bring social emotional learning into programming for that age group? So I think some of the ideas that I heard when I was doing this in the in-person workshops as well was that idea of, again, book clubs, like, for this age group, but with, obviously age appropriate material. And then again, like some of the ideas that you all have already mentioned as well, collaborative art projects, STEM challenges, like things like opportunities for them to work together, right? Engineering challenges, like, can you take popsicle sticks and build a bridge from that chair to this chair? Ready, set, go, right? So.
We have one comment that builds off the comment about naming emotions of people in the book, which is have kids actually show you the emotions on their face. Mm-hmm. So show me an angry face, a happy face, a frustrated face.
Yeah.
And one of those Storyblocks videos does just that very well. So we'll send that link. Another idea is, how are you feeling today while in the library? Normalizing all kinds of feelings.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. Yep. I ran into that like after school a lot, right? Like kids come out of school and come to the library for an after school program, and they're showing up in all sorts of different emotional states, like validating that for them. You feel what you feel right now, right? That's okay. Come on in. So how about any ideas that have come up for your tweens and teens, or things that you're already doing for them?
Oh, okay, we have a long one here. Okay. Teens planning programs for other teens. Maybe getting the teen advisory board involved or other teen volunteers and letting them have ownership of the program, but also asking them to really think about what other teens might like. Consider what other teens are feeling and what might make sense from a programming perspective based on those ideas.
That is fantastic. That is amazing. Wonderful.
And also, I like what was said earlier about that middle school book club and choosing books very intentionally. And you can certainly do that for teen book group as well.
Definitely. And this group also is great for service learning or service projects. And that, is another way for them to sort of practice interpersonal skills with people who may not be in their age group necessarily, folks who are younger or older than they are, folks with very different life experiences than theirs. So I think that's also another thing to think about. And then that just builds that opportunity for civic engagement is kind of cool. I can be be of service to my community. So that's a great opportunity for those sorts of programs too. So, and then anything that's come to mind for adults, either in the sense that you've got adult programming, like pretty much for adults only, or ideas around like family programming or like multiple generations present, multiple age groups present at once. Some ideas from the road. Like, oh, go ahead, Ben.
Oh, we have one of the programs our adult librarians host is something called Topic Tuesday, where the group watches a documentary about some topic and then they discuss it book club style, and often touch on topics that offer windows to other cultures or lifestyles.
Nice. Yeah, that's fantastic. Some other things that I've heard folks talk about are also like the opportunity to invite guest speakers in for adult programs that connect to this. Mental health advocates in your community. Somebody was talking about service dogs, and so we were kind of talking about all the programs that involve dogs, right? So there's like the Read to Rover style program, and then service dogs coming into library, and then the idea of like, could you bring in folks who like train service dogs or run service dog training programs in to talk about like, what are service dogs and how are they trained? Like, what does that process look like? To kind of educate the community around that, give them an opportunity to learn if they might be curious about that topic. So, opportunities to think about that. And Melody's going to talk a little bit more about that next session too, like just that idea of connecting with folks who are of service or provide help, to others in the community, and how you can connect the library to them, and then them to your patrons. Okay, so just a few resources to highlight. And while I'm highlighting those, if you have your own favorite resources when it comes to social emotional learning, please toss those in the chat to share with everybody. So I kind of picked like 3 in 3 different formats, because sometimes I'm in the mood to read things and sometimes it's easier for me to watch or listen to things to pick up information. So I like to share that. PLA has an entire series that's available for free. You do not have to be a member of PLA to access this, but they have an entire series on social emotional learning in the library. They have some, overview, more generalized webinar sessions, and then they also have some that break down to age groups, some that break down to, various specific topics under that header of social emotional learning and it taking place like in or through the library. So you do have to create like a user account on the website to access the series, but you do not have to be a member of PLA to access it. So, and then this is a great book that just kind of gets into the neurobiology of social emotional learning in children as they're developing. It is a bit school centric, but it could translate pretty easily for most of you to the library environment as well. But it just has kind of like that interesting what's going on in like the brain and the body when it comes to this sort of thing for children. And then same sort of topic like this podcast with neuroscience researcher who focuses on this idea of social emotional learning and the brain. So if you're a podcast kind of person and you want to geek out a little bit about that, like that's a good reference too. All right, so that's all I've got on this topic. I think we're going to take a break. I will stick around during the break. If anybody has questions they want to ask around this topic, they could, you can use the chat or you can unmute and just ask, and we can chat a little bit more if you want. And then other than that, I'm going to turn it back over to Beth.
So hi again. For those of you who weren't here at the start when I introduced myself, I'll do it again. My name is Christy Moran, pronouns she, her, ella. I am Beth's counterpart at the Colorado State Library, serving adult library and adult library services, libraries, librarians, library staff, and all kinds of programming and partnerships. So I am the adult library services consultant. Typically, the CSLP or summer learning and summer library programs focus on children. And that's fantastic. And I get that. Kids are out of school for the most part. We need to give them something to do. We need to keep them engaged and keep us from falling into that gap, right? That learning cliff. But the majority of the people who use libraries are adults. Even during the summer, kids aren't typically, though I worked at a library where this was kind of the case, kids aren't typically just walking in all by themselves. We, as an adult, are like the captive audience of the library during the summer. So Beth invited me and extended the offer to see how I can help support adults, everybody else in the library during the summer. And I know that when all our resources are stretched with engagement programs, with kids programming, with showing the movies and all the hands-on activities and having a fair and having all sorts of things particularly geared to kids, the reality is that we don't have a lot of staff, we don't have a lot of time, we don't have a lot of capacity or money to engage our adult users. But that doesn't mean we can't. So to that end, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. To that end, today I'll be presenting to you passive programming for adults. Now, granted, I'm saying for adults, but you'll see these are highly adaptable, flexible. They can be used for intergenerational programming or for kids and teens, but passive programming for adults that are geared toward and centered around the summer learning theme for this year is all together now, which is such an adaptable theme and such a relatable theme. I mean, we're doing so much of that work already. I am going to open up the chat and move it over to the screen. So just in case anybody is chatting, I can see that as well. So today's agenda, the agenda for my presentation, I think I told you a little bit already, but summer learning, right? So why am I here? Why are we talking about adults? Does it matter that we're talking about, adults during the summer? Passive programming 101, I think we think of programming as very hands-on. I do so much programming. We think of it as very hands-on, requiring a lot of time, requiring a lot of effort, and requiring a lot of attention on our part. So I want to present to you what I think is my working definition of passive programming. And I think a lot of us have a similar idea. I created a kit. So for those of you who don't know, Colorado State Library has resource kits. I'll talk a little bit about that. But I created a kit to support passive programming for summer learning for adults. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that, show you a little bit about what the contents of the kits are and how they can support you. And then I'm going to share a few partners and resources, some that Beth has mentioned, some that Kate mentioned, some that Melody mentioned, but definitely stuff that places where you can go to find more resources for passive programming for adults and for summer learning and beyond. So first things first, why adults? I think I kind of told you a little bit about that. We're there. We, as in adults, are in libraries during the summer, whether we bring in children or not. Years ago, I think the first year that I worked at a joint use library. So I was a college librarian, but I worked on the public services desk for a major regional public library. Summer rolls around. They've got fewer students at the college, but I have tons of kids coming in. There's all this, we've got the Beanstack for all like the activities for the kids, and they're going to do this reading challenge, and they've got all of these movies and programs and hands-on activities. And I wanted to be a part of it too. I mean, I'm like, at that point in my mid 30s, early 30s, I'm going, why is there nothing for me? I'm here. I like reading about stars and science fiction. Why can't I be a part of this? So we are there, like we, as in people who work at the library, but certainly adults of all kinds are in the library at that time, irrespective of whether or not we come in with kids. Kids don't come alone. We are the majority of library users. A lot of our libraries do outreach outside of the library, where we run programs, when we work with partners like senior centers, active adult centers, in different community organization, program rooms. These are places where we're meeting with adults during the summer. And these are all opportunities for us to provide them with something that is engaging, something that brings them closer to the library and closer to the theme, this really universal theme of all together now. We do a lot of all together now themed programming, collecting services all year. There are I would say their library's evergreen theme. And a lot of the materials that we have for this summer are ones that can be used outside of the summer, but certainly all of the materials that I present for us, and the ways that I hope that you engage with adults and with really just people who visit the library, are having them through passive programs engage with the library itself, whether it's the collection, whether it's the people who work at the library, whether it's the other programs that we have, or even with the children's and youth services programming. The last bullet point, I can say this, I think all of us agree with this. Adult engagement with staff, library, and fellow users can build community, and it drives repeated visits. Right now, all of a sudden, the library is where they go for community purposes. It becomes their community center, becomes a place where they're familiar, right? It's Cheers. And that increases the value of the library to the community, because now you're hitting up all of those individuals who have a vested interest in the library. We hear passive programming in library world, and I think all of us have different ideas of what that means. The preferred term, and these four terms came from Passive Programming 101. There's a resource, it's a book that I could share with you later on. These four terms came up. My favorite is environmental engagement. Independent programs is definitely a way to think about it. So these are passive programs, are not necessarily a crossword on a table. That is, hear me out here, a crossword on a table. A jigsaw puzzle that people just do is just a game that you've put on a table. The passive program that I'm talking about, and I think the way that I like to frame passive programs, are actual engagement with the library, the collection, like I said, the people who work there, other programs, other people in the library, and the ideas and the kind of values of the library independently on their own. There is some facilitation-ish, there's some monitoring, but these are programs or opportunities for engagement that are outside of the, I'm just going to stand here and lead and direct a program. Kate put in the chat, and she's right, another one that I've heard too is the self-directed program. And that's really what it is. It's that idea of I, as an individual, kind of guide myself and lead myself on whether or not I'm going to engage with the program, and how much my engagement is going to be, like, right, what's my level of engagement. I would say that kind of atypically of me, those are the two that I like, right? Environmental engagement and independent programs, but like the hipster kind of librarian version, which would mean I probably typically would have gone with, would be the anti or the unprogramming, right? Like, how can we deconstruct the program and remove kind of the hand holding? So you may have heard that as well. Passive programs, independent programs, self-directed programs, environmental engagement are low effort, high yield programs, which to me is like ideal for the summer environment, particularly at a public library. I mean, if you think about it, you are stretched. The capacity is on a regular non-summer day, we are busy. We are over capacity. We are struggling to staff programs and do all of the tasks that a library requires in order to just kind of operate. And the passive program is ideal in that it is a low effort program. They tend to be incredibly low cost. If you have a printer, and I wager that most of you do, you can probably run quite a bit of this stuff on your own. The My Passive Program resource kit, you can probably print out all of that stuff on your own. There's some other stuff in there, but you could print it out. Some of the materials are stuff that you already have in the library. I mentioned that these don't necessarily need to be facilitated. They don't. If you could have staff, and it doesn't have to be a librarian, monitor an area that has materials for passive or independent programs, that's usually good enough. You can engage circ staff or tech staff who are also frontline in helping run or collect or maintain whatever it is that you're using as your passive program location and materials. You could require, this stuff requires some planning, but it's not sitting down and coming up with a ton of outcomes, activities toward those outcomes. The reality is these are very easy to plan. They don't require too much time, effort, or money to run or plan for. We all have high traffic areas in our libraries, whether it's the lobby, whether it's, if you're talking about summer, wherever you're doing kids programming in the summer, it could be a table right outside of that, right? Where do the parents linger? It could be if you happen to have a seating area where adults tend to linger outside of the program area or program room, this might be key as your high traffic area for the summer. Places like that get people passing by them all the time. And if you have stuff on there, I will guarantee that people will at least pause and take a look at it. To me, the ideal, like the environmental engagement kind of definition or version of passive programming that I prefer has a very high recursive element. That means like it comes back to you. So that engagement drives itself, it's self-perpetuating, but it brings people who are engaging into contact with the people who work at the library. They return something, right? They bring you something. You mark something off for them. You add it to something. It becomes a relationship that drives itself. So definitely the stuff that I'm showing you or encouraging, giving you materials for, has a lot of recursive and returnable kind of engagement opportunities. And all of those return opportunities, all of those times that you meet with someone, those are all transactions. Those are all statistics. Those can demonstrate the value of passive programming, programming that identifies adults, funding for programming that identifies adults during the time when we're funneling a lot of our programming funds and a lot of our staff and labor efforts towards youth services. And again, a lot of this stuff is intergenerational and is not exclusive only to adults. So you also get the added value of recursive returning and driving statistics for across the board for library users. Also, you can use any of these things to promote traditional library programs. So a passive program doesn't have to exist in a vacuum. It doesn't. Nothing in our libraries exists in a vacuum. And if it leads to promotion or it crosses over to promotion or engagement in some other traditional programs, that's yet another value add. Also, a lot of the stuff that I'm going to show you is sexy and it takes good photos. And that alone can be used as content to promote on social media, newsletters, on your presentations, when your library directors are presenting to the board, or when the board is presenting, when you're all presenting to try to get people to buy into the value of libraries. This stuff takes good photos. And I'll show you some examples of what I mean by that. When we did this in person, we had the kits and we had all of the materials there on a table, and we don't have those here. However, Beth just put in the chat the link to the landing page for the passive program kit that I put together. And you can see some of that kind of like photogenicness of the materials, or the kinds of things that you could do with passive programs for adults in the summer. I mentioned this before, and I'm so sorry, I'm just lecturing, but it's a little hard when I don't have my materials here with me, but nevertheless, I mentioned this before. The themes of this year's 2023 CSLP, the All Together Now, are resonant with libraries. So with all of us. We do stuff like this all the time. And like I said, these passive program and programming materials, whatever they are, do not exist in a vacuum. They can cross-pollinate, they can cross-promote, but they can also deliver content and create an audience that is like a community built around programs that you can do like in the traditional setting of facilitated programs. So if you've heard of Living Room Conversations, and if you haven't, I could talk your ear off about it. I've got another kit for that too. Living Room Conversations, or we have other resource kits for Let 'em Talk, where we have like themes around which, and I think someone mentioned like the topic kind of discussion group. Those are all things that kind of cross over with a lot of passive programming opportunities that you have, certainly for adults during the summer. I mean, literally, you could just do the same programs that you do and just brand it as summer at the library for grown-ups, you know? I'm going to show you some of these. The community recipe swap, or a recipe library, is something that super lends itself to the All Together Now theme, but it's also attractive and also builds community. I have some of that content in the kit, and I will show you that a little bit. But it's definitely a way of tying in community theme and community centeredness centered around your very different and unique communities with the summer learning program and themes. I think it's next week, Beth is going to talk a little bit about ways that teens can engage with the summer learning program, summer library program. And one of the things that they can do that we can do too are opportunities to do things like book pantry drives, volunteerism, volunteer drives, panels of different organizations that people can volunteer for, because we have a lot of teenagers volunteering at libraries over the summer, but we also have a lot of organizations outside of libraries that could use volunteers in any event. Themed book discussions. We have, like I mentioned, the Living Room Conversations kit, but you have themed book lists everywhere. We're librarians. The CSLP manual has now a section for adults. You could create a discussion group around some of those books. Kindness, right? Your kindness discussion group. Films that you can watch and talk about and lead in discussion. These all build community and are community centered. And collaborative crafting or meetups. We all do all of this stuff all the time anyway, right? It's just framing it in the context of the summer library programs and then kind of engaging adults through that process. So I mentioned the mini kit. I call it a mini kit because there's not a lot of materials in there that you can't just download on your own. I mean, I literally have some of them at my desk with me right now. These are all things that are in the kit, but you could also download from the link that Beth has put up. So what's in there? Printouts and master copies of community themed word puzzles for adults that I created with the branding of the CSLP, but again, you can use this all the time. Kindness bingo. Beth mentioned one of the partners that we had worked with. We had met as a result of planning for CSLP this year, but I hope to have a long relationship with them, which is the Random Acts of Kindness Foundation. They have so many materials on their website. It's actually kind of ridiculous. It was very hard to just find a few of the resources. Random Acts of Kindness is branching out into a lot of different arenas, but particularly for adults. There are everything from the kindness bingo cards to coloring pages for adults to booklets for adults. It's actually really great. So there's also origami. I don't know how to do origami, but bless your hearts if you know how to do origami. There are origami patterns. There are recipe cards for a community cooks program that I recommend, that I've given some instruction on or outline for. A binder and a USB with all of this stuff that's downloadable, and a magnetic poetry kit, including the magnetic mag. So some of the recursive and engaging elements of that are in the kit, using some of those things. Every kindness bingo card is different, but it is a bingo card. If you ask at the back, you could put whatever you want on it, but if you ask people to take them and fill them out, and once they get a bingo of kindness activities, if you have them return it, you can on the back have their name and email address and do a raffle for one of your summer learning prizes. You could put them on a mobile or garland. You can pin them to the wall. When we did this in person, we stuck them to the wall. This recursive element serves as demonstration of how kind your community is. Look at how kind our community is. Look at this amazing display of kindness bingo cards. Look at all the people who did kind things, getting them to come back into the library and to give this to you, creating that relationship centered around a theme. Super cheap, print it out, and it's engaging and wonderful, and they're all different. None of this is something that I created and I didn't see before. Why not have a community magnetic poetry or a magnetic poem? You can use the magnetic poetry kit that's in the resource kit, or you can create them, and I didn't have time to do that, on index cards, all the different words. Instead of having one person sit down and bogart the table, have every person create a line. Have somebody who works at the library take a photo or write down and transcribe a line of poetry. Have them all build on one another's lines so that you end up with the stanza. You end up with this beautiful poem that's been curated and crafted by your own, authored by your own community. Have those shared on social media. Now you've got this amazing literary creative project and product that is a product of your community. All together now, none of this exists without it. I really liked this idea. I kind of modified someone else's. You're asking people to build origami. Great. Someone can sit at a table and make fold little paper animals. But what if you collected them and put them in a zoo? What if you had them have little artist cards? Here's John. He is a construction worker. He is really horrible at folding paper, but he made this amazing elephant that is now a part of our community zoo. Keep it in a display case. Show off the silliness and the wonder of all of these grown-ups sitting down, folding. And again, what's the cost? Like literally it's paper. You can put up, do you have a tablet? You have a video projector or a monitor? You can put up DIY YouTube videos, and there are links for that in there too. How to fold, you could do a community gathering to have people folding your little animals. Nevertheless, this one was the most popular of the things that we showed, and I've had meetings with people since then. I'm happy to have meetings with you about it. It doesn't necessarily have to be a cookbook, but maybe you can put together a binder with some sheet protectors and have people take an empty recipe card, put it on a sheet of paper, and have them write a recipe for something that they love to do at home. If you think about the people in your community, they come from everywhere. I say this all the time, I'm Cuban American. I can guarantee you that I can contribute recipes that perhaps no one else in your community is contributing, but that doesn't mean that no one else in your community wants it. Like, who doesn't want an arroz con pollo recipe? Everybody tells me that they want it. I can make a vegan one. If I was in your community, I'd contribute that. Why not tie it into a contest? Put it all together in a book and make copies of them, and then count how many recipes are taken from each one. And then the person at the end who has the most recipes done and taken gets your summer learning prize. Or how about just collecting it on a wall? Or how about doing a potluck? Or how about tying this to a food literature book discussion group? All of these things these run themselves. You don't actually have to sit there manning a table with copies. You can just literally put up a sign with directions. You can open up a binder and show an example of it. These are ways, and these are ways that tie the people who live in your community to the collection that you have at the library, but also to the people you have at the library, also to one another. I don't know. So far, I've been talking a lot. I wanted to go through, because we didn't really have all that much time for our presentation. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but all of these are opportunities, and there are other opportunities to use passive programming, interactive things like whiteboard polls, like take and return, quizzes, and crafts to kind of tell the story of your library, to count the amount of people. I hate to say it that way, but it's so important for us to count the amount of people that are engaging with our libraries and with our programs over the summer. And in particular, if you can capture adult data, this can be really instrumental in driving funding in the future for programs and collections. There's a resource slide. I'm going to go ahead and share with you all a link that's got all the resources from all our presentations in an email after next week's session. So I don't want to spend too much time on that. But what I do want to do, I just talked for so long. Are any of these things that I've shown you things that kind of speak to you about, or things that you can see happening in your library? Even if you're in youth services, I don't think that these are things outside of the things that you can present and support in your own libraries. So does anyone have any questions about any of these things, or comments, or ideas for implementing, whether it's, I don't know, kindness bingo or community cooks? Any questions about that or thoughts?
I'm just going to unmute. This is Bridget Kiley.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm from Arapahoe Libraries. I was going to type this and I was like, it's going to take me too long. So I was just going to speak. Sorry, my camera's off. I'm sitting in my bedroom and I don't need to but we have a program our youth librarians do. So our children's librarians who work with like elementary age kiddos, that is called Kids Who Cook, which is sort of a cooking program for kiddos. So like, I was just shadowing it. I'm the supervisor of the youth and teen librarians at our district. And I just shadowed it this weekend, and they made two things. They made dips this week. So they did a brownie batter dip and a ranch dip. And then they had, veggies to cut up and fruits to cut up and things for it. And and grownups are welcome to come and stay, but not required. But I'd say like more than half of grownups kind of stuck around and cooked with their kids. And like, the program is just something that it's one of our more both work intensive and cost intensive programs, but a lot of the stuff that you're talking about just really blossoms in this program. And when you were talking about this this passive idea for grownups specifically, I just see this as a really lovely opportunity to I don't know, kind of have it so grownups who don't have kiddos can kind of get a glimpse into some of the stuff that's happening at the library that they might not otherwise keep an eye out for. It just feels like an opportunity for us to do some cross promotion like you were talking about, but also to potentially, I don't know, we just have like a really busy library that we do this at our Eloise May library. It's really lots of patrons in and out. And I love the idea of kind of tying together stuff you're already doing with something that's more like on the floor. Someone can kind of grab it if they're in a hurry, but they don't have to. I don't know where I was going with this. Anyway, I just wanted to
Well,
share because
it doesn't, that's the key, right? It doesn't have to stop. A passive program could just be put something. I mean, I don't think that's a passive program. I think that's just distribution of flyers. Like that's a bulletin board. But to literally have directions on, take an empty recipe page, return it to the library, add to our, community cooks program, a very resource intensive, very hands-on, very labor resource intensive program like the one that you describe works. It works really well, but it's done in one shot, right? I mean, or several shots, but it's done in like one
exactly.
shot. This is something that can go on. I met with a librarian. I was like, I don't want to wait on this. I want to do it now for winter. And I was like, so do one for, what are your winter recipes? Like, give us stews, give us all that stuff. You think Janice's stew is great. How about mine? Mine's better than Janice's stew. Contribute to a community winter cookbook, right? Everybody has different communities, but you also have different seasons, right? Take advantage of it. Over the summer, you might get summer recipes, right? How about the people who, right? These are things like, that's how she wanted to do. I was like, what are you talking about? You could do this forever. You could have how many cookbooks do we have? There are cookbook, like reading book clubs, and they all make like a recipe from each book. Why don't you make a recipe out of each other's? I mean, we are all here, right? The kindness bingo, the origami, these are things that can live in your library, but without being resource intensive or time intensive, but they add value to literally the space. I mean, let's forget the fact that we've got a ton of stuff for kids and all this really cool decoration. Why not have the grownups contribute? And again, like you said, not just the grownups who have kids, right? You alienate so many people. Christine writes, we have senior lunch and learn programs that meet monthly, except in the summer months. Nice idea to build on this and offer intergenerational programmings and kids for kids and seniors to come together and cook in the summer. Yes, I had read before, actually one of the ways I kind of built that one was I'd read about an activity or a program that was virtual, where like a grandma and a kid made a recipe on YouTube, like on video for other people. So they facilitated a program of their own recipes. And then that cycles through. Think of all the people who we leave out, even people who had kids who are now like parents of kids, right? Like seniors, other older adults. There's just a lot of opportunity beyond kids programming during the summer. I wouldn't want you to leave out, but I also know how hard it is to run all those programs. Like, I know how hard it is and to find people who will run all those programs. So hopefully I gave you some resources and some ideas, even if it was a bit of an info dump. But hopefully, and certainly there are a lot of resources that we'll be sharing and that are shared. Even if you don't request the mini kit, we have 3, by the way. One of them is out in the world right now. But you don't have to wait to summer to request it. You could request it and just see what's in the kit. You could just make a bunch of copies of it. And if you just want to reach out to me and see like what else is there that you didn't put in the kit, I could absolutely share that with you. So I'm going to turn it over to Beth. I took, she said, take extra time. And then I did. So I hope I did a favor for all of us. I hope you all enjoyed that. And I hope you can all contribute to the community cooks in your neck of the woods. I certainly, if I were to walk into a library and see that recipe card, I might contribute. Cuban pastelitos de carne, or like I say, the not carne because I don't eat meat, and they're bomb and they're legit, or arroz con pollo, not pollo, which I call arroz con not pollo, which is still legit, and people are still asking me for the recipe. So I don't know, put them out there, and maybe when I visit libraries over the summer, you'll end up with an extra.
Well, thank you, Christy. I think you have amazing ideas. Can't wait to see the kits circulate widely. And yeah, I think you've given a lot of spectacular ideas. And with that, we'll turn to just the last few minutes here of the session. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. And we're going to turn to some quick and easy ways to feedback from your community, either about your, I'm saying summer program here, but this is all the time. This is any program, any service that your library has, this will work for. So even though I'm saying summer, just think of it as a evergreen idea that you can use for all programs all year long. So the overarching goal here is to work with your community to really co-design with them a summer program and get them really participating in it and providing their ideas. And so traditionally this is done, and probably the ideal way to go about this is to have a series of feedback opportunities for your community. So for instance, surveys, you can do written or online, one-on-one surveys. You can have focus groups, of course, where you call together, let's say in this example for summer, you might call together parents or teachers and say, okay, we want your input into the summer's program. Let's sit down for an hour and we'll ask you some guiding questions and you can give us your feedback. You also could do that with teens, of course, and even kids. Get those focus groups going. You could also have longer lasting advisory boards, right? That's real commitment, both on your part and the part of the advisory board participants. But you could have like a summer learning advisory board that is perpetual, it's ongoing. Focus groups tend to be just one and done. You can also have some interactive community workshops where you really get to working with your community members in a more hands-on way, like what could this actually look like? More like design thinking kind of a thing. And again, that's sort of the ideal for getting community input into your library services. That takes a lot of time. All of those things take a lot of time, both your time and their time, whoever you're asking to participate in this program or in this feedback session. And so it's more challenging. So I'm going to give you some quick, easy ways to get community input. And again, I'm using summer as sort of the excuse for this, but think of it anytime. So probably the first thing to do is to get ideas. And so I'm calling this a wish tree. It does not have to look like a tree, although it can. We have two examples here on the photos where it actually looks like a tree. But it can just be something like this middle photo, just a bulletin board. And here you can ask a question. And you really are seeking open-ended responses, not paragraphs, right? These are all fairly limited size items here. But you could have the little tags on a tree. And here's, help us, what is your wish? And then it says, I wish. And then here it's, youth, adults, and preschool in the middle section. And a wish tree, it could, again, be any question that you want. And so this is great for again, if you, maybe a question would be, how would you how would you like to track summer learning? You probably wouldn't phrase it like that. You probably phrase it better than that. But that could be a type of question. What kind of programs would you like this summer? Just open-ended. You could ask really anything you wanted to help shape your summer program. And then you have all of these ideas. Then you need to narrow it down. And so dot boards are great for this. And so again, these can be literal dot boards, as we have here. The left and the middle photo are examples of actual dot boards. And so now you've gotten all these amazing ideas from your wish trees. So many that you can't possibly do them all. So now you need the community to help you prioritize them. So here are some suggestions. So dot boards, again, great for narrowing things down. There are other ways to do this too, to really involve all ages. This one on the right, I absolutely love it. They have kids stacking Legos to say, so you could draw a picture of, let's say, 3 different programs somehow, if you can put that in a visual format, and then have the kids stack Legos. Oh, put your Lego at the program that you like the best. And then at the end of the day, you count the Legos that are there. You can do the same thing with bead and a pom-pom in a jar, right? You can have 3 jars set out, ask the kids, put the pom-pom in the program that you like the best. Very easy, very accessible. And you can even get really pretty young children involved in this decision-making process. Another great thing about both of these, the wish trees and the dot boards, you can put them anywhere in your community. Certainly can put them in your library. You can put them in schools. You can put them in churches, in post offices, big box stores, wherever you can ask and get permission to put one in there. The one here on the left, this is in a park. I know you have weather issues. It might be very temporary and in the summer, but you know, that is a possibility. Some of you are from mountain communities. Maybe you could put them at a ski resort, ski slope. Put them widely so you really get a lot of community members who might not be coming into your library and they still give feedback. Another thing I love about both of these, the wish trees and the dot boards, is survey fatigue is a real thing. I am honestly not too inclined often to fill out a survey. However, if I had something like this wish tree and I had to put a quick idea on a leaf and tape it to the tree, I'll do that because it'll take me, 2 minutes. I'll do that. But a survey, you have to sit down or you have to do, you have to think, write it out. It's just more involved, and there's so many people asking for surveys. So I can do this. Oh, I can put a sticker on a dot board. Sure, I'm going to do that while I'm walking by. Easy. You'll get a lot of responses this way. It's so simple and accessible. So now that you have collected this community input, which is great, it'll really help you shape your program. But sometimes you have these issues, right? So sometimes you might have these great pie in the sky ideas. People are so enthusiastic about something. And so I have a few here. Let's have Neil Gaiman do a writing workshop for teens in our library, right? Oh, amazing. Wouldn't that be incredible? It's not going to happen. Same with the second one. These things are just not feasible for your library. But instead of just dismissing them and say, oh yeah, right. Yeah, we can never do that. And just say no. There are ways to find the core of the ideas in these grand possibilities, right? Okay, so you've heard from your teens that they really want a writing workshop led by a real author. Maybe you take that as the core of that first idea. And you say, okay, we have a great local YA author here, or someone in the state that we know we can get. Or maybe you can get someone more nationally known to do one on Zoom. You know you're not going to get Neil Gaiman, right? But you can get that core done, that core gist of the idea, and still fulfill that wish. For the second one, you can't have a week-long overnight camp, but perhaps you could have the library open for a couple nights during the summer after hours, and make it like camp-like for the kids. And it's not fully overnight, but for a couple hours. Again, you're getting the idea that the kids want some time in the library just for them, and they want it sort of a special time. So maybe that is the possibility. So putting this all together, it's great if you can gather input both from library users and non-users. And again, that's great with these simple techniques to put these wish trees and dot boards out into the community. Then you can group the ideas, include them all to start. It's a great way to brainstorm. Find the commonalities. Break out those wild ideas that seem unfeasible into core wishes that are feasible. And then prioritize, and again, have the dot boards help your community, or have your community help you prioritize. And then when you're done, communicate your plans and really highlight how much the community has had input into what you came out with. So I'm going to stop sharing now. What did you think of those thoughts? Do you think any of that is useful for you? And feel free to unmute or type in the chat, whichever you prefer. I like it because, again, it's easy, it's cheap, really inexpensive to do, and you can really spread out into the community. Little time investment for you and for your community members. Or also would love to hear from you if you do something similar already, how it goes. Yeah, I love the Lego idea. Oh yeah, definitely let the community know, hey, we heard you. Thank you for your input. We have used it. We've incorporated it into what we're putting into play. That also creates some buy-in for people. It's like, oh, they did listen to me. Or even if they didn't take my idea, I know they listened to the community. I know they got lots of great ideas. And so I still feel heard. Yeah, sticky notes on a question board, great way to get input at an outreach event. Yeah, definitely. Especially if you're there anyway, particularly to give an outreach event, why not use that technique to get some input? Great idea. And again, so easy and cheap. So Kate used a wish tree style board bedtime math series as an assessment tool. Yeah, that's another great way to use that. There are lots of ways you can use both the wish tree style and the dot board style feedback tools. That's great. Great. Well, I think that's about all we have. I do want to let you know we will be posting all of the materials that we use today, and we have some handouts as well that complements this. We have a lot of resource handouts. We can also post our slides as well that we've all been using. And we will be having the second in this series a week from today also from 1 to 3. And if you registered for this session, you're already automatically registered for that session. So you don't have to do that again. And then at the end, Christy, I think I've got this right. At the end of that session, we will post all of these resources at one time, including the archives to both of these sessions.
Correct. At the end of the next session, everyone who registered for any of these sessions, so say you attended this one, but not the next one, you can't attend, doesn't matter. If you registered to attend any of these sessions, you get the link to all of our resources, which will include the recordings of these two meetings. And they'll be uploaded in there. We'll put them into YouTube so they're easy access, and you can use closed captioning for accessibility and just convenience. All of our slides are in there, all of the resources, anything we mention, and a lot of the stuff that we didn't have time to mention or didn't mention, including partnership links and things like that, are also in there. So you can look forward to that, along with our evaluation for the whole swath of programming that we've done for this. So expect that this time next week. And I'm going to I'm going to stop the recording now, by the way.
Thanks. And